So mercy or judgment? Which one do you like? Let's say you're making the decision. You're making the judgment. Do you prefer mercy or justice? Part of you is probably thinking, Pastor, I actually read the service notes and I've been listening to the lesson, so I think we're probably just going to say mercy good, judgment bad, right? But that question is a little bit more complicated than we give it credit sometimes. If we are to really appreciate what Jesus is going to be telling us about grace, if we do want to hear this parable with fresh ears, if we want to hear this parable with such an impact, as if we've never heard it before, if we really want to understand what the meaning and the value of it is, then I think we have to wrestle with mercy and with judgment. I think it helps to think about some of the objections to mercy, doesn't it? You think about it, mercy is great when it's for me, but when it's for others, when it costs me something, I maybe get a little bit uneasy about it. Let's say I'm the person that is asked to forgive, to be gracious to others. Sometimes you might be the guy that ends up with the short end of the stick, the guy that gets wronged, the guy that doesn't have all of his property restored, the guy who ends up damaged. Or maybe think about this, what happens to the bad people? If you show mercy to them, if you don't give them what they necessarily deserve, if you forgive them, if you're gracious, well, what if they don't learn the right lesson from it? What if they take it and they abuse it, the grace that you've shown them? What if you give them an inch and they take another mile and they continue to mistreat you? What if they never learn? Or for that matter, what about the good people? What about those of us that have sacrificed? We've stayed on the straight and narrow. We've held our tongues. We've tried to restrain our impulses. If you're going to be gracious, if you're going to treat the wicked and the good alike, then what kind of message are you sending? Are you saying that sin and carelessness and cruelty, that they don't really matter? Or are you saying that service and loyalty and sacrifice, that all means nothing? If you squint your eyes and maybe you give in to a little bit of self-righteousness, grace can feel like a slap in the face. You ask this, what if it's just not fair? What if it's just not fair that the Johnny-come-latelys of the world, that the ne'er-do-wells of the world, they can just slip in at the last hour? Is that really fair? Or maybe you even ask God's approval if he gives it out so freely, if he gives it out to anyone who asks, is it really worth anything? You think about some of those objections and you come back to the question, mercy or judgment, which do you prefer? Maybe that question begins to become a little bit more complex, because I think there's something in us that hears judgment and says, yeah, that sounds right. You make your bed, you lie in it. You do the crime, now you got to do the time. To us that makes good sense and that scratches a kind of itch. But today, as we hear Jesus' parable, we hear how God comes down on the side of mercy. He doesn't ignore judgment, but we talk about that later. If we can at least grapple with that, I think we can come to understand the Pharisees. Because the Pharisees, they were watching Jesus and see Jesus. He had this habit of hanging out with sinners. He would eat with them, he would go into their homes, and the Pharisees, to them, this seemed very wrong. That this man, he claimed to be from a holy God that cannot tolerate sin, and yet there he is, shoulder to shoulder with them, elbow to elbow, dining at the same table. Does God not care about sin? Well, Jesus, in order to show them God's heart, in order to teach them about his mercy, about his grace, he tells them a story, both to the sinner and to the sanctimonious. It says a certain man once had 2 sons, and the younger one, well, he felt that kind of impulse that we all kind of feel from time to time, that urge to stray, to hop the father's fence, to slip free the family rules, to get out into that great wide world and sample some of its temptations. That younger son, he couldn't wait to run away from the family, to get away from the father, get away from the brother, to hop that fence and finally go and live and indulge, to live in that great wide world and do whatever he wanted to. And so he does the unthinkable. He asks his father for the inheritance right now up front. It's as if he's saying, Dad, you're better to me dead than alive. I don't really want to be here. I don't really want to be with you. So how about we just divvy it up and I can go my separate way. Well, it's one thing to ask just for the inheritance to be divided up, but it's another thing to run off with it. You think of that, what's an inheritance before it's an inheritance? Well, that's just called your pension. That's just your bank account. But this younger son, he's willing to take it and he's willing to run off. And maybe even just as astonishingly, the dad does it. Literally in Greek it says he divides his life, you might say his living, right? His means, his substance, the things that would sustain him. He divides it up, and maybe it raised some eyebrows in the village, but that's what he did. And then sure enough, the younger one runs off, puts as much distance as he can between home and himself. He runs off, goes far away from any place that his family could contact him, find him, bother him, look over his shoulder, feel what he could doing, see what he was doing, and then finally he can indulge. And you know how it goes, right? You know the thrills and the freedom and the highs. Finally, a chance to taste the forbidden fruit, whole platters of it, as much as his money could buy. You know how it goes. But then you know how it ends too, doesn't it? Good times don't last forever. Eventually the money evaporates and so do the friends. Soon enough the thrill sours into regret, and the highs give way to deeper and darker lows. He hit rock bottom, not at a rock bottom, but in a mud puddle. Hard to think of a more humiliating scenario for a good Jew to be in than to be feeding pigs. Of course, it was prohibited that they had anything to do with them. They couldn't eat them. They shouldn't touch them. But now, what was going through this young man's mind? He was fantasizing about being one of the pigs, about just eating those pods, eating that slop. Surely this wasn't what he had in mind when he took his first steps away from home, but that's always how sin ends up, isn't it? Regret, shame, humiliation, wondering just how in the world we got there in the first place, how in the world life went so wrong. But then it comes to him. He could make his way back. What if he goes back? His father's servants, they have enough to eat. They're doing fine. And granted, he's burned some bridges. He's going to have to come back. He is probably going to have to plan out some penance. He's probably going to have to eat some crow. But maybe he can lay out this kind of attractive plan. He can rehearse his apology, his confession, and then maybe the dad will take him right back. And so off he goes. He's still caked in pig filth. He has his head hung, but he's rehearsing his confession. You can hear it. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. It'd be interesting. What if the story ended right there? Could you imagine that? If we were firmly on the side of justice and judgment and giving people exactly what they deserved, that might kind of be a compelling little story for us, right? If you want to live recklessly, if you want to live wild, then fine, but that's what you get. If you want to live like a pig, then you get the pigsty. And sure, there can be redemption, but only if you crawl back, only if you eat some crow, only if you make up for every last deed, and only if you live like a slave. If we're kind of firmly on the judgment side of the equation, then that kind of scratches an itch for us, doesn't it? That's what those people kind of get. But that's not where Jesus ends. He continues, but while he was still a long way off, the Father sees him. That's interesting, right? To the father, that son would have been dead, but he never really gave up hope, did he? Apparently, he was still scanning the horizon, hoping against hope that maybe that son would show up. And then he does something that no dignified man in the Middle East would have ever done. He runs. Right? If you're wearing something like this, you don't really run in something like this. It's kind of humiliating. But that's exactly what the father does. He hikes up the robes, and he runs, and he throws his arms around his neck, and he kisses him. The son, still caked in mud, he begins to let out that little confession, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father drowns it out. The ring, the robe, come on, let's go. We got to get it. As if he's saying, stop. The son only gets half of the confession out. Doesn't even get to the part where he's going to pay it back. It's all drowned out by the father, as if the father is saying, stop with all of that. You're not a slave, you're a son. So you wear the family ring, and you get the robe, and you get the sandals. You know, those old symbols, they have a lot more importance than we might see at first. If you get the family ring, the signet ring, that's kind of a big deal. You get reinstated, as if nothing ever happened. But you know what's more, it's not as if the father said, well, son, maybe you'd better hose off and then just lay low for a while. This could be kind of damaging to our family's reputation. No, what does he do? He's going to throw a party. This is not going to be the deep, dark family secret. He's not going to sequester his son in private until maybe they can figure it out, maybe they can roll it out, and this whole thing can blow over. No, this son of his was lost and is found. He was dead, but now he's alive, so we're going to kill the fattened calf. A beautiful ending, but it's not really the ending, is it? Not all is quite well with the world. The whole family isn't together. The older son's still out in the field. We know the younger son pretty well, I think. Have you met the older one? Older son, he's coming in from what is presumably another hard day's work. Coming closer one, what does he hear? The sound of music and dancing. But he doesn't go. No one said, what does he do? He sends a servant. Go ahead, check out. See what's going on over there. And then he hears it. Your brothers come back, and your father has decided to kill the fattened calf for him. Well, to the older brother, this seemed very wrong. Could you imagine that? You slave away all your life. You slave away for your dad's approval, and now this ne'er-do-well. Now he comes back, and he gets the fatted calf. And so what does he do? He doesn't go in. Not going to take part, not going to celebrate that. He sits and he seethes and he sulks. Now say you're the dad, what do? Do you say, let him rot? Let him rot in his self-righteousness? Let him sulk, let him pout, I'm not going to give in. Let's teach him a lesson. Well, this dad, because he loved both of his sons, he's going to go out and plead with him. And he does. But then the older son, boy, he just lays into him. Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered all your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. Boy, you think about it, in one sense, they couldn't be any more different, could they? One slaves, the other parties. One works, the other spends. One disobedient, one dedicated. But in a lot of ways, they're kind of similar, aren't they? Both are, or at least were, far from the Father. One in the faraway land, one in the fields. Both kind of just want the Father's stuff. One wanted the inheritance, and what comes to the older son's mind? It's the goat. I just wanted the goat. Neither of them really grasped how the Father really felt about them. The younger son, he had strayed in his own way, and the older in his. Both had despised the Father in a certain sense. Both of them thought that the way to the Father's heart was through works. Maybe I'm going to have to become a slave to find a place in this family. And the other one, he assumed that he always was a slave. They thought that works were the way to the Father's heart, but neither of them knew that they already had the Father's heart. They had all of it. So which son are you? Maybe it's a younger son. It strikes us as soon as we hear it, the years wasted, the grace abused, the bad decisions, the rock bottom, and we're here and we've made confession and we're ready. We're ready to work our way back into God's good graces. Maybe the older son. Maybe when we think of this parable, we think of the years that we didn't waste, where we stayed on the straight and narrow, the sacrifices that we've made for God, the things that we've done, all of the hours of service, the dollars we've given. We may not have much, but I tell you what we do have. I've got my pride, I've got my piety, and maybe it's a little bit self-righteous, but you're not going to take that away from me. You're not going to strip away all that I've worked for with a little bit of grace just to wipe the slate clean. Whichever son we are, we have to confess it. Confess that we don't understand the Father, how much He loves us. Confess that we've tried to get the Father's things in all the wrong way. Confess that we've gone about this in completely the wrong way. But then we turn back to the Father who loves you as much as he ever has. Same yesterday and today and tomorrow, same 30 years from now, same 30 years in the past. He says this is what the Father says, "My son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours." But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. That's kind of where it ends. It's a cliffhanger parable, isn't it? What happens to the older son? We don't know. Boy, but you hope he goes in, doesn't he? Don't you? You hope he joins the party. He joins the feast. That he gets over this and he says, yes, how wonderful is it to have my brother back? You know, in the end, this tale is probably better called the parable of the Father's love. It's not about one lost son, it's about two. And it's not about the Father being indulgently gracious to one son, but to both of them, the prodigal and the Pharisee alike. See, God is not so disgusted by prodigals or Pharisees that he's not willing to call out to both of them. And so it appears God falls firmly in the camp of mercy. And absolutely he does. He does not give us what our sins deserve. In Scripture it says mercy triumphs over judgment. But does that mean God doesn't care about sin? Does that mean we could twist this parable? Does that mean we could say, well, clearly God, he just doesn't care how I act, so I can do whatever I want? No, if you zoom out and you take the storyteller, Christ himself, into account, what do you see? The reason the Father can be so indulgent to you, the reason he can be infinitely merciful, is because there was another son. Not a son in the parable, but a son in real life. And that son did not receive any kind of mercy on the cross. No, the Father had turned his back. The Father had deserted him. And so he issues this cry of dereliction, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" But we know why. So that he could be indulgent to you and to me. So that he could call us to forgiveness, so that he could kill the fatted calf for us. Sin had erected this barrier, this wall of hostility between us and a holy God. But the reason that Jesus could eat with sinners is that he would die for them. The reason that he could be welcomed into their homes and then welcome them into his heavenly dwelling, even that thief on the cross, the reason he could do all of that is because he would be dying for their sins. So that all that would be left is rejoicing. Just rejoicing. It's all paid for. No need to point fingers. No need to be jealous of one brother against another. Just rejoicing. Just a feast. The cow's it's already on the smoker. The sides are getting prepped. There's music. There's dancing. All that's left is joy. Friends, I don't know how you came into worship this morning feeling like a prodigal or a Pharisee. But if you were feeling like a prodigal and if you were planning out your repayment plan to God, leave it behind. God's already paid for it. Take the ring, take the robe that God gives you. Perhaps we were coming in with this sense of being a Pharisee. How can God be so good to others? Doesn't that diminish what it means to me? God's mercy to others does not diminish in the slightest bit how much he loves you, how much he wants to bless you, how much he wants you at that feast. Friends of Jesus, the Father's calling. Come to the feast and rejoice. Amen.